In this video, we'll talk about how Sketch is going to make your design process faster and easier. I'll frame the conversation around how Sketch compares to Adobe's Creative Cloud. Coming from Creative Cloud, I found so many of my favorite concepts from those apps exist in Sketch. And not only do they exist, the integration improves the overall experience. Pages and artboards are going to make it easy to convey and organize my design. You've seen pages in InDesign and also Fireworks. Sketch has pages, but also includes artboards, which are essentially pages inside of pages. We'll talk more about that later. Sketch also supports symbols and styles, which mirror smart objects in Photoshop and symbols in Fireworks. These make it easy to update an object once and have that change reflected everywhere else inside my document. Sketch also has vector support, so I'm able to do a lot of the tasks that I normally do inside Illustrator directly in Sketch. I can create infinitely scalable designs, and I also have everything that I need to create an icon built directly into the app. Sketch also makes it simple to design for multiple resolutions. I can have all of my main breakpoints on the site that I'm making up at one time to compare how my design looks at each size. Exporting is incredibly easy. No more dialog boxes that leave me wondering where my file went. I can drag my artboard out onto my desktop or directly into any app that I want. I can even export multiple sizes at once, which is helpful if I have to design for standard and higher resolution devices at one time. There's also an app called Sketch Mirror. It's an iOS app that puts my design onto a real device so that I can see it in context. This makes it easy to see if my design works or not. Sketch Mirror supports multiple devices, so I'm able to view my design on both an iPhone and an iPad at the same time. Sketch is constantly evolving, and it's got a great community behind it that makes some truly wonderful plugins. Some of them allow me to get real content into my designs. There are also plugins to document my design for coworkers, do accessibility checks, and more. These efficiencies make it not only efficient, but a pleasure to work in, especially in a world where we're not designing for just one device anymore. I'd like to introduce you to our project. This is Yay Pets. While I wish it were real, this is a fake social network built around sharing photos of your pets. We're going to design for it at various sizes, including mobile and desktop size screens. We'll begin with making rough wireframes. This will enable us to validate our ideas quickly. We'll also create style tiles, which help fill in any visual gaps left by the wireframes. Next, we'll be creating a pattern library, which will help keep our design consistent as it grows. Then, we'll build up to a real interactive prototype that you can test on any device that you'd like. In this video, we'll talk about how and why to organize your designs and how concepts like pages and artboards help you get there. Why keep things organized? This makes your project easier to update and keep track of, especially if you're collaborating with a team or want to revisit it later. If you're wondering what artboards are, you can think of them as a canvas. They're around to collect all of your ideas and help you keep track of what's what. You can create an artboard for each screen size you're designing for. Say, if you're designing something for a responsive website, you could do a small mobile screen, a medium-sized tablet screen, and a desktop-sized screen. You can also have it collect your ideas and iterations. You can keep your main ideas on one artboard while other iterations or interface experiments could be housed on another. You don't have to use an artboard when you're testing an idea, but it'll be more helpful when it comes time to share this with others. If you're wondering about pages, they're collections of artboards. Let's say you're designing an app that requires someone to log in. You could have the entire login flow on one page. Let's get started. Since we're making a responsive website prototype, let's start by creating what we need. I've included some working files for you if you'd like to follow along that way. I have a new document here, and I'm going to insert an artboard. Let's click the insert icon in the toolbar. You can also do the same thing by pressing the A key. In these demonstrations, I'll always call out a keyboard shortcut when one exists, but we'll rely primarily on the interface for now. If you don't know what size artboard you need, you can begin by dragging your pointer around. You'll see that it's listing out the artboard size for us here. Now, let's create an artboard that uses one of Sketch's presets. Let's go back to the insert icon and click Artboard again. If we look over to the right, we'll see several options appear for us. We have iOS devices, responsive web design, and several things listed inside of those groups. Let's start with making a mobile portrait size. You can also click the responsive web design title to add all of those artboards in that group to your main work area, but we'll leave that alone for now. You'll see that the left panel now lists our artboard and has given it a name of Mobile Portrait. You can change that to whatever you'd like, but let's leave that alone for now. One note about artboard sizes. If you're designing something for the latest Apple or Android device, you're probably aware of their higher density screens. Make sure to use the base resolution here, otherwise it'll get hairy when you go to export your design. Sketch can handle exporting for various pixel densities, and it's a breeze. We won't dive into that here though. If you need to make changes to your artboard, like resizing it or duplicating it, it's really easy. If you want to duplicate it, click on the artboard name either in the left panel or the main area, and then choose Edit and Duplicate. You can also press Command D. You may also move this around by copying and pasting it by using Edit Copy, then Edit Paste, or Command C and Command V. If you like to resize it, you're able to do so by clicking and dragging on one of the anchors, or looking at the size in the right panel. Let's resize one now. If we move to the bottom of our artboard, I'll hover over and I'll see that my pointer has changed. All I have to do is click and drag, and I've adjusted the height. Now let's create a page. Take a look in the left-hand panel. See page 1? There's an icon next to it that indicates we can do more if we click it. Let's do that. We now see all the pages in the current document. For us, it's just one so far. The icon that we clicked changed to another icon to allow us to create another page. So let's click that one more time. Here's page 2. We can double-click on the page name and call that whatever we'd like. For the purposes of our demonstration, page 2 is just fine. Hopefully by now, you're familiar enough with the interface to create and adjust artboards as well as create new pages. In this video, you'll learn how to make use of symbols and styles and find out how they can reduce repetition in your design. Using these features makes it a cinch to keep all the objects in your design updated and consistent. It's annoying to have to repeat work. In some apps that I've designed, I found myself having to update the same things over and over again. Symbols and styles remove the need for that repetition, and I couldn't be happier as a result. That allows me to spend more time solving design problems and less time doing grunt work. What are symbols? They're an easily repeatable group of objects. You can place them anywhere, update them once, and have every other instance of it update immediately. If you're familiar with Photoshop, they're very similar to smart objects. A perfect example would be a button with text on it or a site menu header. Symbols are incredibly handy, and I use them all the time. Let's talk about styles. Styles let you maintain a consistent look with text and other objects. They're a lot like CSS in that respect. Let's say you have a specific size, color, and font that you want for headers. A style is a perfect way to make that easily repeatable. One example would be for a primary heading, a secondary heading, and then paragraph text. Let's get to work making some of these. In our document, let's make a rectangle. To do that, we'll choose Insert, Shape, and Rectangle from the toolbar, or we can press the R key. Let's drag that out to a nice clickable size. Let's also add some text. To do that, we'll go back to the Insert menu and choose Text. You can also press the T key if you'd like. I find that's much faster for me. I think you'll find that to be the case too. Press the Escape key to commit that change. And now we can drag it around to be centered with the button. You'll notice that Sketch provides guidelines to help you align things. Now let's make this into a symbol. Let's highlight both the text and the shape behind it. If you look up in the menu bar, you'll see Create Symbol is highlighted. Let's click that. Now you've got a symbol that you can use and copy and paste anywhere. Let's give that a shot. So let's go to Edit and Duplicate. We see something else has been added to our layers palette on the left-hand side. We see something is highlighted in the work area. Let's go ahead and move that around. That looks exactly like the first one. What if we make some changes? Let's change the text. To do that, click twice. Now that we have a word highlighted, let's just change that to high. Press Escape to commit that. So it updated the other symbol too. There are lots of other uses for symbols. You can use them for icons, buttons, headers, or any other thing that you'd like to repeat. You can even change the opacity and add shadows to a symbol without affecting the appearance of the other symbols. Let's do that now. Let's highlight one of our symbols on the work area. If we look to the right, we'll see that shadows and opacity are options. Let's click to add a shadow. We see that something happened with our top symbol, and it didn't affect the one on the bottom. If we want, we can also change the opacity. Look where it says 100. Let's input a number to change that. 50 seems good. You can't currently have a symbol within a symbol, so you'll want to rely on styles for the rest. With styles, you're able to apply CSS-like powers to your design. You can create a style and have it repeat as many times as you'd like. You can apply a style to any object, an image, text, or a shape. At the time I'm saying this, you can't do that yet with symbols. That may change in the future though. A few things you can do are control the text size, color, shadows, blurs, text alignment, and more. Using them greatly cuts down on repetition. You can name them any way you'd like, of course, but I usually reference HTML or CSS class elements like header 1, header 2, and so on. Let's go through a few examples. First, let's command click on the text. This way we can directly select an object in a group. If we look in the right panel, we'll see our text options. Let's make this larger and bolder. Let's also center it. Let's also align this within the button, so we'll click and drag on our text object. Let's create a style for what we just did. Directly above the typeface name, we see a menu listing New Text Style. If we click that, we're able to create and organize styles. Let's call this one Large Button Text. Next, let's make a new button with some text. This time, I'll press the R key to create a new rectangle instead of going through the Insert menu. Let's also add some text in here. I'll do that by pressing the T key. Press the Escape key to commit that change. Let's apply the style we just made. It looks like that carried over. Let's also align this one. Next, let's add some color to our buttons. Command-click to select a layer inside of our symbol. This time, we'll be changing the fill and the border. I'd like a gradient on this button, so I'll click the fill swatch and then choose the second icon to choose a linear gradient for something more colorful. That's not colorful enough. Let's look down at the bottom of our screen to select something a little more appropriate. This orange seems nice. Let's change the border. Click to dismiss this window. I'll go and click on the border color swatch and change that to orange. One thing I like about Sketch is the ability to layer multiple effects and borders onto an object. So for fun, let's add another border and set it to be outside of our button. To do that, let's dismiss this window and then click the plus sign to the right of the borders title. Let's make this one darker. Let's choose this brown. It's currently set to center. Click that menu and choose outside. Let's make this a style. Click to dismiss this, and let's click where we see no shared style and create a new one. We'll call this one Orange Button. Just like we did with the text earlier, let's apply that to our button. You'll notice the button text style we created before isn't there. That's because that was a text style and we're dealing with an object style here. Sketch automatically filters out styles that don't apply. That worked out pretty great. There are a few things that we won't get into in this lesson, but I'd like to point out that they're possible. You could also apply styles to images, and you can add any image or pattern to fill objects as well. In this lesson, we've covered what a symbol is, which is an easily repeatable group of objects. You can place them anywhere, update them once, and have that change reflected instantly in every other instance. They're perfect for buttons or anything else you see repeated throughout a design. We also talked about styles. We called these CSS for our objects. They help you maintain a consistent look with text and other objects throughout your document. In this video, we'll talk about a few of Sketch's layout features, such as grids, layouts, rulers, and guides. People like consistency in a product. It helps them feel like they can trust whatever it is that they're using. The more that something looks and feels consistent and coherent, the deeper a person's trust is going to be with it. Let's talk about how Sketch makes that easy by highlighting a few of their tools. The first thing we'll talk about are grids. Sketch has two types. One is your standard square grid. It has settings for the size of the squares and how often you'd like a thick line to appear. That's helpful for getting really granular with a layout, or if you want to work with a particular scale, say that everything should be in units of 10 or units of 12. The other is a layout grid that governs columns and rows. This concept is familiar to those who use responsive frameworks like Twitter's Bootstrap or Zerb's Foundation. Both of these use columns to help content reflow based on a screen size. They both work with grids and columns, and those concepts also exist in Sketch. Depending on what you need, you may only need one of these types of grids. I find that I don't use the square grid very often and rely more on the layout grid. Sketch also provides guides and rulers. If you've used Photoshop or Fireworks or any major graphics program, you'll be familiar with these concepts. Using these helps save guesswork by showing you exactly where you should place an object. Let's get started with some examples. First, let's create some artboards. We'll go to the Insert menu and choose Artboard. Let's select the Desktop HD option here and begin to set up a grid. To do that, we'll go to View, Canvas, and Grid Settings. You'll also notice that in the Canvas menu, you can toggle the grids and layouts visibility here. You should also keep in mind that the grids you create on an artboard don't carry over to any new pages, so you'll need to recreate these each time you make a new one. It may be helpful to set this as a default if you find yourself doing this over and over. You'll see that in the lower left-hand corner of the Grid and Layout Settings dialog boxes. So as you can see, the regular grid is your typical squared grid with settings for the size of the squares. It's also going to allow you to specify how often you want a thick line to appear. If you don't know what your grid structure will be yet, a square grid is helpful in defining that. If you do know, you can use the layouts to be a little more precise. Let's talk about that next. Let's go to View, Canvas, and Layout Settings. In here, you can create any number of columns to fit within your artboard. Here, we see several options that range from setting the total width, the grid's offset, the number of columns, and their width. You can also specify a gutter, which is the space between columns, and its size. Let's make our columns about 100 pixels. We'll want the total width of our columns to be the size of our artboard, which is 1440 pixels. We'll see that the gutter has gotten a little smaller to compensate, and that's good. If you decide that you need a wider gutter, you can also tweak that at any time. Remember that when you're working with smaller screens, you may not need as many columns, but to maintain a consistent design, the column and gutter width should be the same. Next, let's talk about rulers and guides. If you're trying to align objects, Sketch makes it really easy to do that. If you are moving objects around the canvas, Sketch also shows you the nearest object and how far away you are from it. So let's make a few rectangles and begin to move them around. Instead of going through the Insert menu, I'm just going to press the R key here. If I begin to move this around, you'll see that Sketch shows me how far away my current object is from its nearest neighbor. If I ever need to take a quick measurement of how far away an object is from another, I only need to hold down the Alt key and hover over the other object. I find this really helpful since it reduces the guesswork. You also have rulers at your disposal. They're hidden by default, so let's go to View, Canvas, and make sure that Show Rulers is checked. Let's make a guide that's at the left edge of one of our rectangles. We'll put our pointer up in the ruler and see a guide pop up. Sketch makes guides sticky, which makes it easy to create a guide right next to an object with absolute precision. Let's click to create our guide. If we decide that we don't need this guide anymore, all we need to do is click and drag it out of view. In this lesson, we'll cover the types of masks that Sketch offers, as well as how to use them. Using a mask is helpful for selectively showing part of an image or other elements in your design. It's also useful for quick image crops. Say you have an image inside of your design, but its ratio isn't quite right. You can make it appear to have the ratio you'd like by using a mask. There are two types of masks that we're going to see here. There's the shape mask, which is the most common type of mask. This will selectively show or hide part of an object. There's also the alpha mask. This is like the shape mask, but allows you to have objects appear to fade in and out. You can also use this trick to apply reflections to an object. With all that said, let's see how these actually work. First up, we'll make a shape mask. We'll want to work with an image. I already have one on my clipboard, so I'm going to paste it in. Now I'm going to make my mask. I'm going to go to Insert, choose Shape, and Rectangle. You can use any shape you'd like though. I'm going to make mine a square, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key as I click and drag to constrain this to be a square. Now that I've made my potential mask, I'm going to highlight both of my elements. I'm going to go to Layer, and Mask with Selected Shape. We've just made our first mask. Let's look over in the left-hand panel and expand this group. We'll see that our photo is in there, as well as the mask that we created. You want to make sure to keep your mask inside of a group, otherwise it's going to affect every other object on your artboard. If you decide that you don't want the mask anymore, all you need to do is right-click on Mask, and you can uncheck Use as Mask. Now you're free to delete it or do whatever you'd like with it. I'm finished with it, so I'm going to delete it. Let's make an alpha mask. If you want an object to appear to fade out, or give it what designers call the wet floor look, this is one way to do it. Let's take that image of ours and paste another instance onto the artboard. I'll copy this one, and I'll paste it, and I'll look over in the right-hand panel and choose to flip it vertically. Let's drag this down below. We'll leave a little space to make it easy for us to draw our mask. I'll nudge this down by holding the Shift and down arrow key. Let's make our mask. Instead of going through the Insert menu, I'm going to press the R key and begin drawing my mask. I'm going to uncheck the border, click on the Fill swatch, select Linear Gradient, and I'm going to look down at the bottom of my screen and select the gradient that fades out. Now this is going the opposite way that I'd like, so I'm going to rotate it 2 times. Now let's close that and highlight both of our objects again. We'll go to Layer and Mask with Selected Shape. Look at that, it fades out. Now we can nudge it back up, and it looks like there's a reflection. To wrap up, we've learned two types of masking techniques. One is to selectively show an object or group, and the other lets us fade objects in and out. In this lesson, we'll cover the ins and outs of working with text inside of Sketch. Sketch provides most of the functions you'd expect when working with text, but also adds a few of its own to make life easier. First, we'll talk about the text inspector. This is where you can change text properties like underline, strike through, etc. Sketch also lets you turn text into a list, which is something I haven't encountered anywhere else. You can handle letter spacing here, and also line spacing. We'll take a look at text styles. I'll use a CSS concept here. These are a lot like CSS classes. They help you easily apply a style to multiple elements. I'll show you how to use text on a path. If you'd like to make your text follow a line or a shape, this is your tool. Lastly, we'll talk about outlines and anti-aliasing. Outlines are helpful if you need to turn a font into a shape. This process turns live text into a path and allows you to edit individual anchor points. You want to be careful with how much text you convert to an outline because the more you do this, the slower Sketch is going to run for you. So a headline is likely to be fine, but several paragraphs of text, not so much. I'll talk briefly about anti-aliasing too. It's a way of rendering fonts to make them look crisper. Let's get started and see how all of this works. First, we'll open the Sketch working file that I provided. We'll see that we have several text options here that range from headers to paragraph text. One of my favorite things to do when working on a project is to see which typeface fits best. Something I love about Sketch is that it honors the weight that I use when I switch typefaces. What I mean by that is if we highlight this text, we'll see that the weight is set to bold. This is set to regular, and so is the rest of it. If I decide all this needs to be in Georgia, I see that Sketch has honored my choices. That's super handy for me and a big time saver. You can also turn text into a list or change the text decoration options. To do that, select the text you'd like to make a list and click the gear icon next to the color swatch. We'll see that if we want, we can underline it, double underline it, or even strike through it. If we'd like to change the list type, we have two kinds, numbered and bulleted. If I need to set character and line spacing, I can do that too. Let's select our super big title and change the character spacing to be a little wider. Look over in the right-hand panel and find spacing. We'll change the character spacing to 1. For larger text and headings, it's best to have line spacing between 90 and 110% of the text size so that it feels more connected. The more line spacing you add, the more disconnected the text can feel. Let's take this large text, look at the type size, which is 24. We'll make the line spacing the same value. Paragraph text should be between 120 to 140% of the type size to give it enough breathing room. So here, we'll see that we have 18, and this is also listed as 18 for line spacing. Let's change that to 21. If I like what I see, I can make a text style out of this to reuse anywhere else. If we look above the typeface name, we'll see a menu that says No Text Style. Let's click that to create our own. Some of my go-tos for naming text styles are to name them after HTML elements. In this case, I'll call it paragraph. Now, I can apply this style to any other text in my document. Next, let's talk about text on a path. If you'd like to create text that floats along a shape, say a circle or a diagonal line, Sketch can do that for you. Here's how that works. First, let's make a line. Let's go to the Insert menu, choose Shape, and then select Line, or you can press the L key. I'm going to make this a little more dynamic by making my line diagonal. Okay, next we need to add a little text. Let's go back to the Insert menu and choose Text, or we can press the T key. So let's select both of these and go to Type and choose Text on Path. Sometimes you want to convert text to an outline. This is helpful if you're creating a logo from text or if the original typeface isn't going to be available if you pass this on to another designer. You want to take care with converting text to outlines because the more you convert, the harder Sketch has to work to display it. Here's how you do it. Let's select our text, go to the Type menu, and choose Convert Text to Outlines. If we look in the left-hand menu, we'll see that our text has become something like a group. If we expand it, we'll see that our text has become paths, and we can edit each of them individually. If you're working on something for iOS, you'll want to disable subpixel anti-aliasing. Without boring you with too many details, subpixel anti-aliasing is a way that an operating system can increase the legibility of text. Your Mac does this by default, so it's good to enable if your design is going to be displayed on one. If you're designing exclusively for iOS, this isn't available. It's best to turn it off to get the most accurate representation of what you'd see on a device. To do that, we'll go to Sketch and choose Preferences, and under Font Rendering, we can uncheck Subpixel Anti-Aliasing. Hopefully by now you have a better understanding of what you can do with text inside of Sketch. In this lesson, we'll be discussing a few Sketch plugins that we can use to improve our design process. I'll be pointing out a few useful plugins that are available. We'll also learn how they can speed up your workflow and get real content into your design. First, let's talk about why putting real content in your design is important. It's important because it puts you closer to the actual experience that people will have when they use the product you're designing. Using real text and real images from the products that you're working on helps you understand your design limitations and helps you get closer to the actual product you'll be creating. For example, a design that has 10 paragraphs and one image will need a different design than one that has one paragraph and 10 images. If you're curious about where to get great Sketch plugins, I have two resources to recommend. The first is Sketch Toolbox. It's a Mac app which collects Sketch plugins for you to install. It auto-updates the plugins as soon as a new version is released. This is by far the easiest way to work with Sketch plugins. You can also visit another website called Sketch App Sources to download plugins manually. They also have a lot of other resources for designers that range from templates to design assets to Sketch plugins. Let's start talking about a few plugins. The first one we'll be talking about is the Sketch Content Generator plugin. This helps you get away from standard lorem ipsum and put real images and real text into your design. Let me show you how that works. Let's say I'd like to include some images. All I need to do to get this plugin working is to start drawing shapes. You can use any shape you'd like, but I'm going to use a circle. Let's go to the Insert menu, choose Shape, and select Oval, or you can press the O key. I'm going to hold down the Shift key to constrain this to be a perfect circle, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Once I've made my shape, I can go to the Plugins menu, select my plugin, go to Photos, and select something from Nature and Urban. That saved me a ton of time. If I don't like what I see, I can choose to run the plugin again until I get something that works for me. All I need to do is go to the Plugins menu and choose to run Nature and Urban again. If I don't like what I see, I can even add my own images. Let me show you how that works. Let's draw a rectangle first. I'll go to the Insert menu, choose Shape, and Rectangle, or I can press the R key. So let's go to Plugins, Photos, and let's choose My Photos. This plugin is telling me that I need to follow some instructions. Let's see what it has to say. Reveal the plugins folder, open another folder, and begin to drag photos into this destination. So let's do that. Reveal the plugins folder. I'll go inside here. I'll go into Data, Photos, and My Photos. This looks familiar. I've already got some photos that I'd like to add, so let's go get those. I'll select them, and I'll drag them into this folder. I won't be needing this anymore, so I can delete it. Let's try this again. That's one of the photos that I just added. You can also use this plugin to add various kinds of text, like dates, headlines, or standard paragraph text. There's also dummy text if you need it. To see how that works, let's press the T key, and now hit the Escape key to commit those changes. I'll go up to the Plugins menu and see what kinds of text options I have. That seems a little wide for me, so I'll make the size of this, let's say 300. So you can see that it's really easy to use this to generate a paragraph, but if you decide that you like your own custom text inside of here, that's also possible. Let's add some more text and hit the Escape key to commit the change. Go to Plugins and select My Text. It looks like I'm getting some other kinds of instructions here. Let's again resize this so that it's readable. It looks like I need to open another file and do some editing. So I'll go and reveal the plugins folder. And I'll go to the Data, Text, and My Text file. I can open this in any text editor that I'd like. I'll choose to use Sublime Text. This looks familiar. I'll begin to add some text of my own between these quotes. Select the end of the line and begin typing. I'll add a comma at the end of the line to follow those instructions. We can save this. Let's go back into Sketch. Let's try it and see if it worked. We'll add some more text onto our screen. Go to the Plugins menu, choose Text, Dummy Text, and let's generate some of my text. That's exactly what I typed. You can even build on this to create your own list of headlines, paragraph text, or any other kinds of text you want to add. I do this with my projects, so the content my team sees is actually from the product we're working on. In this video, we're continuing our conversation on how to use plugins to improve your design process. Another plugin I like is Sketch Notebook. This is a design documentation tool that makes it easy to communicate your logic with your team. Sketch Notebook allows you to highlight a group or object to call out certain features. I've already installed this via Sketch Toolbox and have my working file open. So let's find something we'd like to comment on. This can be a group, symbol, or even a single object. I have something to say about this button, so let's go up to the Plugins menu, choose Sketch Notebook, and add a comment. And we'll see that there's a callout that's been added to our button, and our artboard has been extended. So you'll see that several bits of information are listed: the file name, the date, the author, and you'll also see the full comment below. If you find that you like to focus on designing and don't want to see these comments, all you need to do is go to the Plugins menu and toggle the sidebar visibility. These comments aren't deleted, they're merely toggled off. The last plugin I'd like to talk about is an accessibility tool called Contrast Analyzer. This plugin helps with accessibility by measuring the contrast of an object and comparing it to accessibility standards. According to the W3C, this was created to compensate for the loss of contrast sensitivity usually experienced by users with vision loss equivalent to approximately 20/40 vision. There are two levels that we work with. Level AA is the standard for minimum contrast. Level AA works with a 3:1 contrast ratio. Level AAA is enhanced and goes all the way up to a 7:1 contrast ratio. This helps those with more extreme forms of vision loss, which is around 20 to 80 vision. Let's see how this plugin works. I'll highlight two objects on my artboard, go to the Plugins menu, choose Sketch Color Contrast Analyzer, and I'll see an alert at the bottom of my screen that I passed level AA. Let's see what that would look like on a much lower contrast background. Let's run it again. We see that we failed. This plugin doesn't yet work with images as backgrounds, nor does it support transparent objects. If those are in your design, you'll need to find other ways of checking your contrast. There's a lot more you can do to work with accessibility, but this could be a good start. Plugins are a constantly evolving area, so always keep a check on them to see what's new. Now we'll talk about how you can work with vector art and create your own icons inside of Sketch. Let's focus on the vector formats that Sketch supports. It works with a few natively. SVG and EPS are fully supported. Sketch doesn't currently work with Adobe Illustrator files, but you can copy things directly from your artboards in Illustrator and transfer them to Sketch. Let's have a look at what we can do. I've fired up Sketch and have an artboard ready to go. Let's start by inserting a shape into our artboard. I'll go to the Insert menu, choose Shape, and select a triangle. Let's double-click on this to see the control points. We'll notice that we have one that's already selected. It has a darker border around it. I'd like to take a second and talk about the ways we can change our paths. The kind we have here is a straight path. There are no curves, no rounded edges. If I'd like, I can change this to a mirrored path, which has identical curves on each side of my control point. There are other types here, like the asymmetric one, where the lengths can be different, but the curves are still going to mirror each other. Finally, there are disconnected paths. These control points work independently of each other, so you can have a completely custom shape. I think the mirrored one works best for me here, so I'm going to undo those changes. One other neat feature is that you can rotate copies of a shape. Let's see how that works. With my path selected, I'll go to Layer, Paths, and Rotate Copies. Let's say I'd like to rotate 6 copies here. I'll choose OK. And look at that! I have a neat repeated pattern made out of my design. Let's create a new artboard and try something else. I'm going to copy this artboard, and I'm going to go to Edit and Duplicate. Now I'm going to get rid of what's on the artboard, and we'll talk about combining shapes. Let's start out and try to draw a puzzle piece. Let's get a rounded rectangle and put it on our artboard. I'll go to Insert, shape, and I'll choose rounded. I can also press the U key if I'd like. I'm going to hold down the Shift key as I drag to constrain this to a square. If I look in the right-hand panel, I can change the radius. Let's take it down to around here. Now I'll draw another rounded rectangle. So I'll go to Insert, Shape, and choose Rounded. This time, I'm not going to hold down the Shift key. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make the part of the puzzle piece that sticks out a bit. Let's duplicate this by going to Edit and Duplicate, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. So I'll go to the menu bar, and I'll choose to rotate. I'll hold down the Shift key as I click and drag. I'm going to move this up and have it stick out of the top. Now, let's take out part of the puzzle piece. Duplicate this shape again. I'm going to press the Command D key this time, and I'm going to overlay the tip onto our puzzle piece. I'm also going to duplicate this piece. Again, I'll press Command D, and I'll drag it over to the left-hand side. Now, this doesn't quite look like a puzzle piece yet, but it's going to very soon. Now what we'll do is I'll take these two shapes, select the rectangle that I'm going to combine it with, then I'll go to the menu bar and I'll choose to merge these layers together. That's starting to look a bit more like a puzzle piece. Now, let's take our other objects and let's subtract them. That looks a lot more like a puzzle piece to me. One other thing I like to do in Sketch is use the scissors tool. This lets me cut away part of the shape without ruining my entire object. Let's duplicate this artboard, and I'll delete what's on the artboard. Let's say we'd like to make an undo icon. Let's start by making a circle, so I'll go to the Insert menu, choose Shape, and choose Oval, or I can press the O key. I'm going to hold down the Shift and Alt keys so that all of my actions happen from the center, and it's constrained to a circle. Now, what I'd like to do is turn off the fill and have a darker border, and I'd like this to be pretty thick. Let's dismiss this. Go to Layer, Paths, and choose Scissors. If I hover over a certain part of my path with the scissors tool activated, I'll start to see that there are some dots. If I click those, I can remove that part of the shape. Now I can go to the Insert menu, choose Shape, and I'll insert a triangle. Again, I'll hold down the Shift key as I do this. That looks like it's about the right height. And this time, I'm going to flip it vertically. Now let's drag this into place. And let's also change the fill color and turn off the border so that everything matches. So that's how we work with paths in Sketch. Next time you need an icon or you need to alter a path, you can make that happen in Sketch without having to leave the app. Now we get to talk about something that I love doing, taking shortcuts. Some of these will be purely keyboard based, but others take advantage of Sketch's lesser known features. Let's put a rectangle on our artboard. So I'll go to the Insert menu, choose Shape and Rectangle. I don't know the exact dimensions I'd like this rectangle to be, but 33% seems like what I'd want. Normally what I'd have to do is find the artboard size, find 33% of that, and then type that value into the width of this object. That's a lot more work than we need to do. With Sketch, I can simply enter a percentage value, and it does the math automatically. In addition to working with percentages, you can add and subtract values here too. So if I need this to be 27 pixels taller, I can do 98 plus 27. I love that this saves me time and prevents me from having to use a calculator. I'd like a new rectangle on this artboard. I could go to Edit and Duplicate, or I could make another one on my own. I could also hold down the Alt key and then click and drag to create a new one. I've also decided that this rectangle needs to be rounded off a bit, but only on the bottom. Sketch can handle that too. If I move to the right-hand panel, I can specify my own radius values for each corner. So in this case, we'll do 0, 0, 10, and 10. I also want to make my rectangle a certain shade of green, and I'd like to add a shadow to it. So let's do that. I'll find a green that I like, maybe a little darker. Let's dismiss that, and we'll add a shadow too. Now if I'd like my other rectangle to be this style, I could recreate it, or I could make a shared style. I can also hold down the Command, Option, and C key to copy the style, and I can use Command, Option, and V to paste this onto my other rectangle. Speaking of, I really like this color. I'd like to use it in all of my designs, even ones outside of this project. I can do that by specifying this as a global color. All I need to do is select the color I'd like, and then I can hit the plus sign to create a new global color, and it's there anytime I need it in the future. One more trick about colors. If I need to quickly sample a color, I can do that too. Press Ctrl C to bring up a magnifying glass, and it helps me select the right color I need. Let's make one more rectangle. I'll press the R key this time. If you find that you're tired of the standard gray box with a darker border, you can set your own defaults. So let's say I'd like this to be a bit darker, and I don't need a border. All I need to do is go to the Edit menu and choose to set the style as default. So anytime I make a new rectangle or other shape, again, I'll press the R key, and I'll make a new rectangle. I'll see that it follows the style that I want. Sometimes I like to call people over to my desk to see what I'm working on. I'd rather than focus on the design and get the other palettes out of the way. Sketch has a presentation mode that you can access by going to View, Presentation Mode, or you can press Command period, and everything else gets out of your way. These tricks have helped me out a lot, and I hope they're beneficial for you too. Let's talk about what wireframes are, why they're helpful, and how to make one in Sketch. One thing I like about wireframes is that they're cheap and effective. When I say cheap, I mean in terms of time commitment. You don't have to go through the entire design process, pick out your typography and your imagery. This is the bare bones of your project right here. Their nature makes it easy to spot problem areas early on since they're such lower fidelity than a highly polished mockup. If something doesn't work, you can throw it out and try something new. These can also be helpful in communicating with your team about what should go where. In a responsive world where everything constantly reflows based on screen size, I find these even more valuable. I've provided a blueprint file that you can use here. Feel free to take this and modify it for other projects if you find it helpful. You'll see a few typography choices, some color swatches, some interface elements like headers, user meta, buttons, text inputs. You'll also see placeholder images and sample posts. If you're wondering why everything is blue, I think that wireframes are pretty closely linked with blueprints for buildings. They both specify where everything goes, but steer clear of visual design details. What we're going to be doing is wireframing a user dashboard for the social network YayPets. Let's think about a few kinds of elements we'll need to see on a page. A few things are coming to mind. A header, a way to post updates, seeing other people's updates, along with images and some text. Let's grab the header and begin to move it over to our mobile portrait artboard. I'm going to hold down the Option key and click and drag. And I can nudge this over to be at the very top. Let's change the name and change a couple of these link titles here. I'll Command click to select an item inside of a group and call it YayPets. I'll do the same for this text over here, and we'll be entering Profile and Search. Now let's zoom in a bit so we can see this a bit better. So the next thing that we'll want to add is a space for people to post an update. So let's add a text field and change the placeholder text. I'll hold down the Option key while I click and drag, and I'll Command click to change the text inside of this group. Let's add a link to allow people to add photos and videos. Now that's a bit dark, so we'll go to the right-hand panel and select a text style. I'll choose paragraph and small text here. I'll nudge this over and align it with the text update field. Next up, let's see what a post might look like. We'd like to add a photo of the user, their name, when they posted it, and a few other things like the actual post itself. Let's go over to our wireframe kit and we'll choose the user meta. I'm going to Option click and drag this over. And I'm going to need an image. I'll select this one. And I'm going to Option click and drag as well. Let's begin to align these things. I'm going to hold down the Shift key as I click and drag to make this larger. And I'll use the arrow keys to nudge this up a little closer. And let's go ahead and add some text in here too. We have a sample post that we can use. I'll Option click and drag this in. It wouldn't be a social network if people couldn't react to anything, so let's add a place for comments. Let's copy over the text input again, and I'm going to Option click and drag that over, and I'm going to change the text inside of it. People may also want to post custom stickers as a reply, so let's add a drop-down menu that can contain several options here too. I'll Option click and drag this over, and let's align this with the text field itself. Let's change the text inside of here to say React, so I'm going to Command click and change the text. Now let's do a little bit of fine tuning. We'll move these things down just a little to add some more spacing, and let's group these together. So we'll highlight all the objects I want, and I'll go to the menu bar and choose Group. And now let's try a couple of other posts. I need to make this artboard a little taller, so I'm going to click on the artboard name. I'm going to drag down at the bottom of it, So to save a bit of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to option click and drag this original post. I'm going to remove the image. This is going to be a text only post. So I'm going to double click to go inside of my group. I'm going to select the text, the reply box, and the react box, and move it up a bit. Now let's add one more post. Option click and drag this one down so we have a third one. This is getting cut off a bit, so let's go up to the top, click on our artboard name, and let's make it a little bit taller. We'll talk more about wireframes in the next video. We're about to put the finishing touches on our mobile wireframes. The questions we need to answer now are what happens when someone clicks on React or when they click on Search. Let's duplicate this artboard again. I'll option click and drag on the artboard name to create a new one. And let's talk about handling search first. Let's go grab the text input and we'll copy it to our clipboard by pressing Command C. And let's begin to move everything else down so that we can place the search right below the header. Let's move it up here. We'll nudge it down a bit. Let's also add a background behind this so people don't confuse it with being able to update their status. We'll go to the Insert menu, to Shape and Rectangle, and we'll drag this out behind. Let's make it the same color as our placeholder image. So I'm going to press the Command and C key to sample the color of the placeholder image. All I need to do is hover over it. So let's move this behind the text input too. We'll go to Arrange, and then we'll move this to the back. Let's also change the text inside of here. Again, I'll Command click. Let's select everything else here and let's move it up just a bit. Now let's add the drop-down menu for when someone clicks on React. Let's go over to our wireframe kit and select the drop-down menu with all the images inside. Option click and drag, and I'll place it below, and I'll also go and change the style of the React button. Command click to select it. Go to the right-hand panel, click on drop-down, and drop-down selected. And that's going to do it for the mobile wireframe. We wanted to start with a smaller screen first because this helps us solve problems with more constraints, space being the most important one. It's easy to scale the solution up, and it's much harder to scale it down if we started with a larger screen. Let's talk a little about the desktop version. I'm not going to go through and repeat all of this work with you, but I'm going to include this as a reference. Let's scroll over and take a look. We'll zoom out so we can see what we're working with here. You'll see that we've made a few changes as we've taken advantage of the larger artboard here. We've expanded the search field and also made the post a little larger to take better advantage of the canvas size. In the span of just a few minutes, you've created a quick and dirty version of the site that you can talk to your team about to ensure that it meets all the business requirements. You can also take this to your engineer pals to see if they can build it. Let's talk about style tiles. If you're new to the idea, style tiles bridge the gap between a wireframe and a prototype. They show you the look of a product without getting attached to the layout. They help you define typography, object styles, and overall feel without having to commit to an entire design. I like what the Style Tiles website has to say about it. It says that style tiles are similar to the paint chips and fabric swatches an interior designer gets approval on before designing a room. An interior designer doesn't design 3 different rooms for a client at the first kickoff meeting, so why do web designers design 3 different web page mockups? I could not agree more. I often deliver these alongside a wireframe since they help folks connect the dots between what they see in the wireframe and the visual style we're going for. So if you're wondering why style tiles, they're super quick. They are like wireframes except for visuals. They help people understand how their product is going to look without having to design the entire thing. One note here, these shouldn't be referred to as final designs since they don't always reflect content requirements. That said, let's get to making one. I provided a working file to get you started. Inside, you'll see a few things. You'll see color swatches, you'll see typographic elements, and a few adjectives that might describe our project. Let's go ahead and update those. I'm going to Command click and start to change some of this text. I think this project should be bold, vibrant, fun, happy, and uplifting. These are going to help guide the rest of my design choices. I've also included some photos to help you get started. Let's paste those in now. Please feel free to pause and replace this with all of your own pet photos. So one thing I'd like to do is select a few colors for my design. I know that this brand has some that exist already. One is in their logo. So let's sample that and add it to our list of possible colors. To do that, I'll command click on the first swatch, and then I'll press the Control and C keys to bring up the color sampler. Let's make a secondary color that's going to complement this. So I'll command click on the second swatch. Again, I'll press Control and C to bring up the color sampler and sample that first color. I'm going to want to make this a bit darker, so let's go over to change the fill. I'll find something that's a little bit darker. Next up, we should get an accent color. I'm going to sample the first swatch again, so I'll press the Control and C key. And then I'm going to move over to the right-hand panel, and I'm going to change this slider to something that's a little closer to the magenta I'm looking for. Let's get a white that we'd like to work with. I'll select the swatch. Let's drag this up to where it's almost white. And now let's get a darker color. I'll command click on the final swatch, and I'll drag the color picker down until I'm satisfied with the color. So now let's take a look at some typography. I've got a font that I think will be perfect here. It's called PT Sans. It's available via Google Fonts, and so I know I'll be able to add it to any website that I want. I also have a copy of it on my machine, so let's go select it. First, I'm going to select the example header, and I'm going to go over to the right-hand panel, and I'm just going to start typing in PT. There's the sans. So let's go ahead and change some of the other instances here too. I'm going to Command and Shift click on all the other text elements, and I'm going to change these to PT Sans as well. Let's go ahead and change some of the text too. So I'll Command click, and I'll say this is best pet social network, period. So I'll go ahead and I'll do the same with the next one. Let's also paste in a status update from the site. And I'm going to go over to the right-hand panel and adjust the line spacing. This one is going to be 16. I'm going to change the example text here to the magenta color. Now that I have this selected, I'll again bring up the color sampler by pressing Control and C and sampling that magenta. Let's zoom in a little bit more so we can see what we're working with. Let's scroll over and find our buttons. I'd like to make these buttons magenta and also change the typefaces. So I'm going to Command click to select the background of the first button, press Control C on my keyboard and sample. And I'm going to do the same here with the second button, except I'm going to do it with the border. So I'll turn the border on, the fill off, and then I'll click on the swatch in the border area, and I'll press the Control C key. Let's also do the same thing with the text inside. So I'll Command click to select it, press Control C to bring up the color sampler, and select that magenta again. I'm going to hold down Command and Shift and also click on the other button text to change both of these to PT Sans. Let's make these bold too. Let's zoom in just a bit. I'm going to add a shadow to this button here, so let's Command click on it. And on the right-hand panel, click Shadows. And I'm going to change the Y offset to 4. I don't want this to be blurry at all, so there we go. One of the things I like best about a style tile is that I can adapt this template to show whatever I want. For example, this project isn't going to use many textures, so I can delete those and make more room for pet photos. So let's go over here and delete textures. I know that I'm going to be using things like status updates and site headers. Those should definitely be here. I've copied them over from another file so that I can begin to work with them inside of my style tile. So let's go up to the top, click on our artboard name. Let's go to the right and begin to increase the size of this artboard. Zoom out just a bit so we can see everything. I'm going to copy in a couple of assets here. I can't see all of that text because some of it's white. So let's go to the Insert menu, select Shape, and choose Rectangle. And let's insert a rectangle, and let's move it to the back. We'll go to Arrange, and choose Move to Back. So what we'll want to do is change the typefaces to match what we've selected. So again, let's zoom in. So I'm going to hold down the Command and Shift keys while I click to select multiples at the same time. So let's go to the right-hand panel, and let's select PT Sans. I'm going to want the text inside of the status update to be darker. So I'm going to select all of those. Again, I'll press the Command and Shift keys as I click on them, and I'll go change the color. Let's scroll over to the left and hold down the Control and C key to select this color. Now I don't really need this gray rectangle anymore, so I can get rid of it. Let's tweak this a little bit more. I'll make the username bold. I'm also going to make the timestamp a little bit smaller, so I'm going to change the size and bring it down a couple of pixels. I'll make it a little bit lighter. Since we're working pretty quickly here, I can simply change the opacity. Now this wouldn't really be much of a status update without pictures, so let's get some of those beautiful pet pictures in here. I like this dog the best. Disclaimer, this dog may or may not be my own dog. I will go to Edit and use Copy. Command click to select inside of this group. I'll paste my photo, delete the placeholder, and command click on my photo again to begin to drag it around inside of this group. I know that I want this to be a certain width, so I'm going to go ahead and type that in now. Let's also add a user's profile photo. I'll select that, and I'll press Command C to copy. Command click to get rid of this. I'll command click again to select something inside of the group so that I can paste inside of it, and I'll paste it. Now let's begin to move this up, and I'll nudge it by holding down the shift and up arrows. Also, this post isn't really about a cat. Let's add a post about something that I did with my dog. Let's move things up just a bit. Select the Leave a Reply and React buttons. There we go. The last thing that we need to do is change the color of our header and paste in our logo. Command click and select the header background color. Scroll to the left, press the Control and C key, and select the cyan. I'm also going to command click and select the logo. Press Command C to copy. We'll get rid of this logo. Now let's talk a bit about pattern libraries. They're a visual reference for everything inside of your design. They're a lot like a style tile, but all grown up. Inside of them, you'll find things like typography, along with the type sizes, icons, content types, colors, and other UI elements. Pattern libraries are helpful because they help you save a ton of time by cutting down on repetition. You know how certain elements are going to look, and you can grab those and get going. They help keep the project visually consistent as it grows. I usually put these together after I've selected a direction and I've gotten a little further down the path with it. I don't want to do a ton of documentation while I design. I think the creative process should be a lot freer and free from documenting as you go, especially early on. Sometimes pattern libraries live in Sketch or Photoshop document. Other times they're integrated into a web page with code snippets. Your mileage may vary, but I've found there's a place for a Sketch document as well as an HTML-based one. All that said, let's talk about what they look like in Sketch. I've got the working file open here. Inside, we've got our final design, the selected style tile, as well as a pattern library that we'll be filling in. I've also included this pattern library as a separate file for you if you'd like to use it later. I'm keeping all of these things on the same page for the sake of our lesson, but you'll probably want to keep these on separate pages at least in your own projects. Let's zoom in and check out our pattern library. Inside, you'll see that we have places for typography, color swatches, any icons that we've used, the grid system that we use, and any other interface components. Let's start by getting our text styles. The bigger your design is, the more cumbersome it's going to become to catalog all of these, so I'm going to rely on a plugin to do that for me. This plugin is called Style Inventory, and you can have it generate things like text styles for you. Let's go to Plugins, Style Inventory, Inventory, and Generate. And I'm going to make sure everything is deselected except for text styles. That's perfect. That saved me so much time. Let's highlight all this. We'll copy it, and we'll head back to page 1 and begin to paste it in. Since I've already made color styles, this is going to be a little easier. I'm not going to rely on the plugin to do that this time, since it pulls every color that you've used in your design, not just the color styles that you've made. So let's go through and make each of these correspond to a color style. Command click on the first one, zoom in a bit. Now go to the right-hand panel and I'll choose primary. Let's take note of the hex color here. Copy this by pressing Command C, and I'll Command and double click to select this group of text. Command V to paste it in. Let's do it for the rest. Command click. We're going to do secondary. We're going to click on the fill swatch. Command C to copy. And let's paste that in there. Command click on the accent color. Find the corresponding style. Click the swatch. And get the hex color. Let's go for our off-white next. We'll copy this and we'll paste it in here. Almost done. Select our black. And our white. Let's go check out the grid system that we've used. I'll scroll over to the mobile portrait artboard and I'll click inside of it to make it active. And let's see the layout that we have. So I'll go to View, Canvas, and Show Layout. Now let's see what this grid's made of. Go back to View, Canvas, and Layout Settings. I can see that I'm using a 60 pixel column as my base, and this has a 15 pixel gutter. The gutter size, as well as the number of columns, may change along with the screen size, so I'm mainly concerned with representing that we have 60 pixels for our column. So we can hit cancel on this. Let's go back to our pattern library. I'm going to make each of these 60 pixels. So I'm going to Command and Shift click on each of these, and I'm going to go to the right-hand panel and change the width to 60. We can see we need to space these out a bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'll Command click on the furthest one, move it over a bit, and I'm going to Command and Shift click on the rest of these. And I'm going to distribute the spacing horizontally. We'll go to the right-hand panel and choose to distribute these horizontally. These could have a little more space here, so I'm going to Command click on this one, and I'm going to nudge it over. And then I'm going to Command Shift click on the rest of these and distribute them horizontally again. And let's go down here and say that we're working with a 60 pixel grid. Next, let's fill in our interface components. I'm going to zoom out a bit, and I'm going to go over to my other artboards, and I'm going to grab the headers. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to Option click and begin to drag it down. And I'm going to go to the desktop version and do the exact same thing. Now that we have both of these in our pattern library, let's click on the name, and let's make this artboard a little taller. Let's drag these down inside of the interface components section. I'm going to grab a few other elements, like a post. Option, click and drag this over. We'll get both posts that we have. And let's also grab the area where we update our status. So I'll Option, click and drag this over. And I'll also go and grab it from the larger version. I'll see that we have a few other things like icons and drop-down menus. So let's get these over too. What I'm going to do is shift and click on all of these, and then I'll Option click and drag them over. Let's make our pattern library a little bit larger. Let's start to arrange these a bit. We'll zoom in. We'll move the status updates next to each other. I'll highlight these and move them all together. Let's double click a few times inside of this group. Copy the React button out by going to Edit and Copy, and then choosing Command V to paste it in, and we'll put it next to our active React button. Zoom out a bit, and I'm going to double click inside of this group, press Command C to copy this button, click outside of it, and press Command V to paste it into my artboard. And so we'll keep all of these elements together. We also have some icons here, so let's double click inside of this site header. We'll press Command C to copy this icon, and Command V to paste it. And let's begin to nudge it up by pressing the Shift and up arrows. We'll probably need a rectangle behind this little guy. I'm going to go to Insert, Shape, and Rectangle, or I can press the R key. Go to Arrange, and move to back so we can still see our icon. Let's do the same with the search icon. Double click inside this group, Command C to copy. I'll press the Shift and up arrows to nudge it up and over. I'm doing this because when you have an icon that's very small, sometimes you can end up changing the size of it if you try to grab it with your mouse. I'm going to scroll down, grab these emoji, press Command T to copy them, scroll up, and we'll paste them in. Now you have something that you can send out to other teammates that'll help them pick up where you left off. Or, if you'd like, they can begin working on another piece of the design and you'll all be in sync. Let's talk a bit about organizing. When I get my design ready to share with someone else, I want to make sure they can understand what I've been up to if they open the file. Why organize? So you can easily communicate to others what you're doing. It also helps you know what you've been up to if you decide to pick this project up after 6 months of inactivity. The thing I'll focus on most is how to make this easy, because I want to spend as little time on this as possible in my design, so I look for ways to stop me from having to do this as much as possible. A few things that I've found are that we need to keep it consistent. So we all have different strategies on naming things. If you don't have one, that's okay. One thing I can say for certain is that the best strategy is one that is the most consistent. Another good thing is to name things as you go. One way to do that is to name your object or group immediately. Once you create something, you can press Command R and rename it. If you do this on the spot, it'll save you a lot of time. Groups make everything wonderful. I make liberal use of them. If I have a chunk of content, say a post, for example, I'll usually put that into a group and call it what it is. I'll do similarly for headers, footers, and other bits of my project. You can also use plugins to help, and we'll talk about one in particular in just a moment. I have our working file open, so let's get down to business. We'll see that we have several groups here. Site header, small copy, rectangle, so on and so forth. These don't really mean anything to other people. What we need to do is make it easier for people to understand what we've got going here. What I'll do is I'll double click and I'll change this to simply say site header. And I'll see that this one is the status update area. This would be very tiresome if I had 40 or 400 more layers to do here, and luckily there's a plugin that'll help relieve that pain. I'll Command Shift click on each of these layers, and I like to call these posts. All I need to do is go to the Plugins menu, use the Rename It plugin, and call them posts. Let's zoom out just a little bit and talk about some of the other things the plugin can do for us. I see that I have a couple of pictures here. We'll take the picture of the dog, Command Shift click on that, and Command Shift click on the picture of the cat, go to the Plugins menu. I'm going to change the name of these to Post Photo, and I'm also going to include the width. All I need to do is add %W onto the end. If you look in the left-hand panel, you'll see Charlie Copy and Bitmap are highlighted. You'll see those will change to Post Photo and also include the width of the picture. This plugin is pretty versatile, and it's enough to clean up about any mess you make when you're creating. I've rolled in at the end of a project and spent half an hour cleaning up, and it made it look like I've been documenting everything neatly as I went the whole time. We could go a lot deeper with this, but we'll stop here. I get that no one wants to do naming, and I hope that I've shown you some ways to save a lot of time and focus on what matters, which is solving a design problem. Let's talk about how Sketch works with exporting and how it handles slices. One of my favorite tools in Sketch is the export tool, mainly because of how it simplifies that process for me. Here's a few things it can do. You can export multiple resolutions and file formats at once. For making apps and websites with varying display densities, that's perfect. I can also copy CSS attributes if I'd like. Let's get into how that works. Let's take a look at our working file. We'll see that our pattern library is in front of us. Let's go ahead and set up a few assets for exporting. Sketch allows you to make anything exportable, whether it's an object, group, symbol, or an artboard itself. Let's say I'd like to export this entire artboard. All I need to do is go to the right-hand panel and click on Export. We'll see that it generates an image, and I can specify different sizes, suffixes, and formats. From here, I can drag this image into any app I want. Let's dive a little deeper and see what we can do with icons. Say I need this happy cat emoji at the standard size, 2x, and one that's 600 pixels wide, and also an SVG format. Normally that would take me several rounds of exports, but with Sketch, all I need to do is make it exportable, and I can begin to add all the conditions that I need. I can specify specific sizes too. In our case, I need something that's 600 pixels wide. All I do is add 600 and put a W at the end. If I need height, swap out the W with an H. I'll change my suffix to 600 pixels, and I'll add one more for SVG. We also don't need this suffix. I can export this if I'd like. All I need to do is select Export Happy Emoji, hit Export, and then I can go check out what's on my desktop. I'd like to try something a little cleaner and have this go into a folder by default. All I need to do is change the layer name back in Sketch. You rename your layer and then add your folder name to the beginning. In this case, let's say IMG, and then add a slash. If I go and export it again, we'll see that it's gone into a folder called IMG. I love this because it saves me a lot of time. Should I need to, I can also copy CSS attributes. If we go look at our header text and select it, all you need to do is choose Edit and copy CSS attributes. Let's see what that looks like. I'll open my text editor and paste it in. That's really helpful if I need to grab the display properties quickly. If I have multiple artboards and assets to work with, it may be more beneficial to head to the File and Export menu. Doing it this way shows you everything that's exportable, and you can choose to export all, some, or none of these. Let's talk a bit about slices. Let's go back to our icons. We have these two icons here, a search icon and a profile icon. I want to export these as 48 pixel wide images. So what I can do is I can go to the Insert menu, choose Slice, or press the S key, and then drag to make my slice. Let's change the name of this by pressing the Command R key and say icon-profile. We'll nudge this up so that it looks nice and centered. Let's also get one for the search icon. In this case, I'll go to Edit and Duplicate. I'll change the name by pressing Command R and type in icon-search. Let's nudge this over a bit and get it centered. You'll notice the gray background behind this icon. I'd like that to not appear in search. I can put this into a group with my icon. I'm going to hold down Command and Shift and click on the search icon, and I'm going to go to the menu bar and select Group. Let's expand the group, select our slice, go to the right-hand panel, and choose to export group contents only. We have no gray background anymore. You can also trim the transparent pixels, but I don't want to do that here. Every slice in Sketch is treated as a layer, and the more that you have, the more cumbersome it becomes. You can hide slices in the layer list by clicking the slice icon at the bottom of your Sketch window. That does it for our chat on slices and exporting. Hopefully next time someone needs you to send them something from your design, you can fire up Sketch and handle it very quickly. Let's talk a bit about prototyping with Invision. Invision is a service that lets you create interactive prototypes. It uses your static design files and lets you simulate websites and apps for phones and also wearables. Before we jump into Invision, let's take a look at our prototype. We have 4 screens here. We have our main screen, a screen where the React button is active, a screen where the search is active, and one where a profile menu is active. We're going to take each of these and make them interactive next. So let's load up Invision and create a new project. I'll call it Yay Pets, and I'll select the project type and choose iPhone. We'll keep this in portrait orientation. We have a few ways of getting our design into Invision. The first option is the simplest. We take our sketch file and we drag it into Invision. When you do that, Invision looks inside your sketch file to see what you've marked for export. It takes those assets and creates new screens for you. You can also sync via Dropbox, Google Drive, or use their Mac app called Invision Sync. If you use any of those syncing methods, everything that you've marked for export shows up automatically in Invision, even if you make changes. I'm going to upload the sketch file that we have. I have a file on my desktop, and I'm simply going to drag it in. It looks like all of our screens are here. Let's make these a little bit smaller so we can see them all at once. These screens are going to show up in the order that you present them, so let's drag the screen that we want to show first to the first position. Now let's begin to make this interactive. I'm going to hover over the first screen and click to go to the edit mode. The first thing I notice is that the status bar is in the way of my menu bar, so let's change that. I'll click the status bar and select my design starts below the status bar. Let's save that. One thing about status bars with these kinds of prototypes, you can only hide them if you're viewing them on a desktop or notebook. This doesn't apply to mobile devices. Let's head over to build mode next. This is how we're going to be able to link our screens together. So let's scroll to the top and start making some hotspots. My first one will take me to the profile page. So I'm going to select the destination of profile. Invision allows me to have this work via tap, but it also supports other gestures. And if I'd like, I can have different kinds of transitions here. Instant is just fine for me. Let's add another for search here, and we'll choose the destination as search. We'll scroll down a bit and add one for the React button. Here, I'm going to want to maintain my scroll position after I click to make this feel more like a real website. Otherwise, it's going to take me to the top of the page whenever I enter. I'm going to go to the profile page by holding down the Shift key as I click. So I'm going to add a hotspot for the logo to take me back to the main page. I'm going to add another hotspot over this so that if we click anywhere else, this menu goes away. Let's add one for search. And let's scroll down and add one for React. We want to make sure that we maintain our scroll position. Let's handle the search page next. Add a hotspot to make this go away. Add one for profile. One over the logo to go home. And one for the React button. Again, we're making sure that we maintain our scroll position. And now we have something that's ready to show off. Let's talk a bit about sharing features next. Let's head to the bottom of the screen and click on Share. You can test your prototype in a variety of ways, but we're going to focus on two. One is viewing it on a mobile device. This lets people view your design in context so you can have a better conversation about how this design solves your problems. You can also view it in a web browser. So I'm going to go to More Options, and I'm going to make sure that we start our share link at our home page. And I'll scroll down, and I'll copy this. We'll view this design in a web browser first. Let's click around and see what we can see. If I click on the profile icon, that feels pretty responsive. The same thing for search. Go back to the main page and activate the React button. We'll see that this really starts to feel like a website. I can also open this link on my device and get a different experience. If I tap to view this inside of the browser, we'll see that this feels like a real website. Let's also take a look and see what it would look like if I add it to my home screen. So I'll click the Action button and choose to add this to the home screen. I see this is on my home screen, and now I can tap it, and this feels a little bit more like an app. That's it for prototyping with Invision. It's nice that we're able to take what we made and actually use it on a device. Now my team and others can see what we've made in context and have better conversations about what we designed. We're going to spend a little time talking about making prototypes in Flinto. Flinto is a service that lets you create mobile-focused interactive prototypes from static images, and it's super fast. With it, you can prototype for iOS devices as well as Android. Flinto has some great features for prototyping iOS apps, with support for back buttons, timed screens, and fixed elements like headers and footers. We won't get into that much here, but it's one of the reasons why I like using it so much. If you take a look at our working file, you'll see that we have 4 screens that we're going to wire up. A main screen, a page where the React button is active, and ones where the search and profile menu are active. Flinto has a few ways to import your designs. One is through a sync with Dropbox, which automatically updates anytime you make changes. The other is a simpler drag and drop interface. The Dropbox sync will save you more time in the long run, so I'd recommend that for more complex projects. For now though, let's export these to our desktop and get going. So I'll go to the File menu, choose Export. Now that these are exported, let's go to Flinto and make a prototype. We'll call this Yapets. We'll leave the device alone, as well as the orientation. We're going to set the status bar style to black opaque. Once we're in the editor, we can drag our files right over. I'm going to make these a bit larger so that I'll have an easier time making hotspots. I'm going to take the mobile portrait screen and drag this up to be first. This way, anytime anyone views a prototype, they're going to start on the right screen. So the first hotspot we'll make is to take us to the profile page. So I'm going to click and drag and create a hotspot here, and I'm going to point it to the profile page. Center that. While we can do this for every single link in our project, Flinto has a tool that makes this a bit easier. They're called link groups. So let's say I'd like this logo to always go to the mobile portrait page. I click to select its destination, and then I click and drag the hotspot onto other screens. That saves me a ton of time. Let's make a hotspot to take us to the search page. Let's also make one for the React button. I'm going to take this hotspot, and I'm going to drag it over to the profile page, and I'm going to do the same for search. I won't do this for the profile page because I need this hotspot to go back to the main screen. Now that that's done, I'm going to go to the React page, add a hotspot under the React area, and take that back to the main page. And I'm going to go up to the top and grab these link groups and put them inside of my React screen. And now let's take this profile link group and add it to search. And I'm going to make one more hotspot for search to go back to the main page. The last hotspot I need to make is for the React button. I'm going to have this one go to the React page. I couldn't use a link group from the other screens since everything else on the search page has been pushed out a bit to allow for the search bar to come in. If you're ready to share, you can do a quick preview by going to the left-hand panel and choosing Preview or press the P key. This will give you a good idea if your prototype is performing the way it should. Everything seems to feel pretty snappy, so I'm ready to send this out to my friends. I'll click in the gray area to dismiss this, go to Share and Install, or press the S key. I'll see a window that allows me to send messages to phones and emails, or I can take a link and do whatever I'd like with it. In this case, I'm going to open it in a new tab and see what we've got. So let's click around and see if everything's working like we'd intended. So far, this looks great. Now let's see what this looks like on a device. Now I have this link up, and I need to add this to my home screen so I can check out my prototype. I'll click the Action button, and I'll add this to my home screen. Now we can see how this works in context. Looking at this design on a desktop or notebook is nice, but it's worth taking this extra step to look at your design in context. This way, you get a better sense for how people are going to use what you designed. That'll do it for Flinto. It's by far one of the fastest ways to whip up an interactive prototype out there today. If you've ever wanted to prototype a more complex animation, Framer Studio is a great way to do that. Framer Studio is built off of Framer.js and it's JavaScript based, so it has a low learning curve. You can control anything on the page, including specifying custom animation types. Services like Invision and Flinto limit you to certain types of animations, but if you can dream it, you can do it in Framer. It also lets you preview your animation live on various types of devices, from watches to desktop computers. Let's take a look at our working file. I've put everything I need onto one artboard, and you'll also notice that I've renamed the layers. Framer lets you import multiple artboards, but I'm going to go a simpler route here. You'll also see that I'm using camel case here. This has so far worked best for me in Framer. Select all of our layers here, and I'm going to export 2x versions of them onto my desktop. Let's hop into Framer Studio next. Framer supports dragging, swiping, and tapping interactions, but I'm only concerned with tapping right now. Let's add a click event to our profile hotspot. Type profile click, period, on, events, period, click, comma, dash, and greater than. Framer requires a specific syntax for events. This is what it is. I'm going to assign an action to a couple of things, and I'm going to use something called a state. I'm going to write this out first, and then we'll talk about it. So I'm going to write profile icon active, states, next, and I'll open and close some parentheses. I'll do the same thing for profile menu active. Framer uses states to help you animate things. Each object has one state built in by default, and that's called the default state. You can specify any number of states and give them unique names. What I'm going to do is add a state for the profile icon active and profile menu active objects and call it second. To do that, we type the name of our object, states, and add, go to the next line and type the name of the state, in this case, it's second, and open and close some brackets, and then type what we want inside of it. We're going to change the opacity to 1. I'm going to copy this and change profile icon active to profile menu active. So let's go check out what this did. Based on what we wrote, I should be able to click on the profile icon and bring up our profile menu, as well as show the active state of the icon. The animation's a bit slow and the menu isn't quite positioned correctly, but that's easily adjustable. Below the profile click event, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type profile menu active, bring to front. Now if we click it again, we'll see that it's at the front. Now what we're going to do is set a default animation. Doing this prevents us from having to specify this for each asset that we create. I'll go a couple of lines above the profile click event, framer, defaults, animation, add an equal sign and some brackets, curve, spring 600, 30, and 0. Let's talk about what that means. You have a few options for animation. I chose to use spring here, but you can also have a standard linear animation or something with easing. Here, you can specify the strength of your spring, which I've set at 600. If you go higher, you'll have a stronger spring. The second value is tension, which I've set to 30, and 0 is the velocity. I chose these values because I've toyed around with them before, but you should play around with them yourself to see what else they can do. So let's see how that changed our animation. Oh, much faster. We'll pick back up in our next video and finish our prototype. We're in the middle of adding interaction to our prototype. Next up, let's work with the React button. Copy and paste what we did for the profile click area and change profile click to React click. Go down to the next line and change profile icon active to React menu. I won't need these extra lines, so we'll delete them. So we'll go down to profile icon active and change that name to React menu. We don't need these other lines here, so we can delete them. Let's go check this out and see how it works. That's doing exactly what we want it to do. We're going to have the search field come in and push everything else down. The first thing I'm going to want to do is make a click event. So let's copy what we did for React click. Let's change the name to search click. So what we're going to do here is give search field and search icon active states. We also need to add states for the rest of the items in our animation, such as post 1, post 2, post 3, and the status update area. Copy this and paste it onto a new line. We'll change this to post 1, this one to post 2, and one more for post 3. We also need to add another state for status update. Now let's define what those states are. The search field and search icon have it easy. We just need to specify their opacity as 1. So let's copy what we did up here for React menu, paste it below, and change that to search icon active. We'll copy and paste that and change the name to search field. For the rest of these, I'm going to do a little math to add something to the Y value of these objects. That something is the height of the search field. So first, let's start with the status update. I'll copy and paste the last couple of lines and swap out the opacity section. I'm going to be working with status update here, and I'm going to type Y 128, which is its current Y position, and then I'm going to add 114 to it. Copy and paste this below and change this one to post 1. Its Y position is 330. We can copy and paste this again, post 2. Its Y position is 1196. And post 3 is at 1642. Let's go check this out. Click on the search icon. That's exactly what I hoped for. Lastly, there's a little cleanup I'd like to do. You may notice that if you try to scroll, that you can't. We can fix this by adding a scroll component. I'm going to go to the top of my document, make a couple of new lines. We'll give it a name and call it scroll. I'll type new scroll component, open my parentheses and brackets, go to a new line. I know I want the width to be 750 and the height to be 1334. That's the size of a Retina iPhone 6. I also want to disable horizontal scrolling since nothing in my design needs to do that. Type scroll horizontal and set that to false. We've got to do one more thing, which is to say which layers belong inside of the scroll component. I'm going to go into the header object and type superlayer, the name of my scroll component, which is scroll, content, and then add a comma. I'm going to copy and paste this into every other element that should be inside of my scroll area. So let's go down the list and start pasting. Let's also include our hotspots. Now let's go see how that works. That looks great. A mobile prototype wouldn't be complete without seeing it on a device, so let's fire one up. For iPhone, you want to download an app called Frameless. Once it's downloaded, you can send it to your device. I have it up here, and so I'm tapping on the profile and the search, and everything feels so fluid. You can also share these on the web if you'd like. In a few minutes, I've created a high-fidelity prototype with custom animation that really helps communicate my ideas. If you're curious, you can always dig deeper at the Framer site. They have a thorough documentation section, as well as a great way of helping you learn other things about Framer. There's also a good community on Facebook. All of those are linked on their site. Have fun! If you're looking to dig deeper with Sketch, you're not short on options. There are several excellent sources to help you learn more. If you're looking to find more design assets, you can check out Sketch App Sources. These folks have everything from templates to plugins. You can also visit Sketch Toolbox, which is a great resource for plugins. If you'd like some more learning and case studies, Smashing Magazine has a flourishing section on their site. I've been fortunate enough to contribute to it and love what they're doing. If you're looking for more ways to prototype, you can check out Design and Code. This walks you through Xcode and Sketch to design an app. I love these links because I learn something every time I open one of them, and I hope that you do too. We've arrived at the end of our course. Hopefully by now, you've seen how amazing Sketch can be for prototyping. We've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the tools that Sketch offers and how to get the most out of them. We talked about some design techniques like making style tiles and wireframes and how they can help validate your ideas. We even built a few prototypes. Sketch has proven to be a wonderful design app, and it's saved me countless hours of hopping between various design apps. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope that Sketch proves as helpful to you as it has for me.